Okay, welcome to my presentation of Introduction to Trigonometry Part 2. This is really useful for students that are either taking a pre-calculus class, maybe need a refresher for a calculus class, or taking the SAT 2 math. I'm just going to go over some of the basics information you need to know. It's very important that you know these angles here. You need to know that that pi is the same thing as 180 degrees, and you can derive every one of these. So it means if you double the pi, you're going to have to double the degree. Pi over 2 is the same as 90. 3 pi over 2 is the same as 270 degrees. Pi over 3 is the same as 60. Pi over 4 is the same as 45, and pi over 6 is equal to 30. Again, these angles are exactly the same thing. These are in radians, these are in degrees. You can either memorize those, and I have those memorized just because I've done them enough, but the easy way, if I ever forget, I always go back to why I know pi is the same thing as 180. So if I want to know what a 60 is, I know 180, I got to divide 180 by 60 to get, I got to divide 180 by 3 to get 60, so I go to pi, I got to divide it by 3, so that tells me that pi over 3 is equal to 60. So again, make sure you memorize those. Okay, a lot of teachers teach the unit circle. It's good to know. There's no question about it. The unit circle is based upon a radius of 1. So, for example, what a lot of teachers have you do is memorize all these values around the graph, which there's no problem about that, except it's a lot of information to try to memorize. What this means is this. If I look at the 45, the coordinate of this point would be the square root of 2 over 2, and the y value would be the square root of 2 over 2. So the cosine of this would be this value, the sine of 45 would be this value. Same way here, the cosine of 30 would be this value, the sine of 30 would be this value. Again, it's a lot of information. Just to give you an idea of how much information that is, if I take this table right here, and I'm just going to kind of scan through it, is what you're being asked to do is to memorize all this information here. And those are all the trig values for all the common angles. Again, nothing wrong with that, except it's a lot of information to memorize. I'm going to show you what I think is a faster way to do it. What I like to do is to teach my students to memorize just some 3 basic angles. I'm going to talk about this one. This is a triangle with a 30 degree. You have a right angle here. Now the 30 degrees is the same thing as pi over 6 as far as the angles go. So the sides you need to know, you need to memorize square root of 3, 1, and 2 are always going to be the ratios. This is going to be the adjacent side, the opposite side, and the hypotenuse. So the cosine is always defined as the adjacent over the hypotenuse, so it's going to be equal to the square root of 3 over 2. The sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so it's 1 over 2. The tangent will be 1 over the square root of 3. Typically, you do not see the radical on the bottom, so you multiply by the square root of 3 by the square root of 3. That's going to give you the square root of 3 over 3. The secant is the same thing as taking the cosine and flipping it, so that instead of this being the denominator, this becomes the numerator. So that's going to be 2 over the square root of 3. Now you're going to get rid of the radical on the bottom, multiply the square root of 3 is 3. That's going to give you 2 times square root of 3 over 3. The cosecant is the same thing as the sine, except you're going to flip it. So the cosecant is going to equal to 2. And the cotangent is the same as the tangent, except you flip it, square root of 3 over 1. Alright, so those you can derive real easy. And all you have to remember are the 3 sides of the 30 degree. Alright, the 60 degree will be very similar. And the 60 is the same thing as pi over 3. So 1 square root of 3, 2. The cosine in this case will be 1 over 2. The sine will be the opposite over the hypotenuse, square root of 3 over 2. The tangent will be the opposite over adjacent, square root of 3 over 1. The secant, the same thing as flipping the cosine, 2. The cosecant, same thing as flipping the sine. Again, you want to get rid of the radical on the bottom, square root of 3 by square root of 3. That's going to give you 2 times the square root of 3 over 3. And the cotangent is flipping the tangent. So I get 1 over the square root of 3, multiplied by the square root of 3 by the square root of 3. That's going to give me the square root of 3 over 3. Alright, so those are the trig functions that you need to memorize. Let's go through what it would be for all the cosines with looking at the 45 degree here. Let me slow down. Sorry about that. Let me slide down here. If I look at the 45 is same thing as pi over 4. So for the 45, you need to memorize 1, 1, square root of 2, with this being a right angle. This is your 45 degree angle, which is the same thing as pi over 4. Move this up a little bit so you can see it. Okay, the cosine will be 1 over the square root of 2. Again, you don't like the radical on the bottom. Multiply by the square root of 2 by square root of 2. That's going to give you the square root of 2 over 2. Now the sine will have the same thing, so that's going to be the square root of 2 over 2. The tangent is opposite over adjacent, so I get 1. The secant is taking the cosine and flipping it. So I'm going to just flip this part right here. That's going to give me the square root of 2 over 1. And then the cosecant is going to be exactly the same thing as the secant in this case. And the cotangent is flipping the tangent, so boom, 1. So from this, I have memorized every one of the trig functions for just the 3 triangles. And all I have to do is memorize the sides of my 3 triangles. Alright, so you need to know that information. I think this is much faster than doing the unit circle. Other information that's going to be key is you need to memorize that for the cosine, you're going to be positive in the first and fourth quadrant, and negative in the second and third quadrant. The sine, you're always going to be positive in the first and second quadrant, negative in the third and fourth quadrant. And for the tangent, you're going to be positive in the first and positive in the fourth, negative in the positive in the first, positive in the third, negative in the second, and negative in the fourth. All right. And then the other information you pretty much need to know is how to do the trig functions for these. For 0, which is the same thing as 2 pi, the cosine of this angle will always equal to 1. The sine of this value will always equal to 0. For pi over 2, it's just going to be the opposite. The sine is going to equal to 1. The cosine in this case will equal to 0. When you get over to pi, the cosine will equal to negative 1. The sine will equal to 0. And for the 3 pi over 2, the sine is equal to negative 1, and the cosine is equal to 0. Alright, so this is just an introduction to some of the trig functions. I'll follow up my next video and give you some details of how to do this when you get at several different locations in the different quadrants.